The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
The East Lindsey series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop located at 20 Ropery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Welcome back to East Lindsey again, everybody. Now, we are definitely on the Wolds in this one. In this particular episode, we are going to be seeing one of the Wolds' biggest and most impressive landmarks, one that you can see for literally miles around. It's the Belmont transmitting station. But before we get to that, we've got to actually walk around the village which it's associated with, and that would be SouthWIllingham. SouthWillingham, village of Whiffle's people, south. A long time ago now, we covered a place in West Lindsey called North Willingham. Now, there's a bit of distance between them, but there is a southern counterpart to that, and today we find ourselves in it. Over the East Lindsey border and deeper into the Wolds is SouthWillingham. It's situated 1 mile south of the A157, where the central Lincolnshire Vale and the Lincolnshire Wolds meet. Much of the village once formed part of the Heanage estate, which was centred on Hainton Hall, a mile to the north. The woodwork of the estate buildings was painted a distinctive post office red. Most of the remaining land was owned by the church, with Glebe Farm providing for its upkeep. The geology under the village is unusually complex, with 4 separate bedrocks located within the parish. Sand, gravel and clay have all been quarried here, and a clay pit supplied a brickworks in the Victorian era. Within the boundaries of SouthWillingham is the Belmont transmitting station, the second tallest structure in the UK. And it's a good thing that that exists here, actually. SouthWillingham isn't exactly bereft of history or of landmarks, but it is a tiny one. It can be considered one of the smallest on the Wolds, in fact. That said, it still possesses a church, and it used to have a school at one time too, as well as both a Wesleyan and United Free Chapel. One thing it's never had is a pub, and after this video, it's going to have its own little corner on YouTube. Let's get it covered. This is the lovely little village of SouthWillingham. In much the same way as in North Willingham over the boundary into West Lindsey, the name derives from the Old English for homestead, and SouthWillingham literally means village of Willers or Whiffle's people. It was recorded in the Domesday Book as WILLINGHAM and contained 3 manors owned by 3 different lords. Situated as it is on the first hill on the western edge of the Wolds, there's an uninterrupted view from the village to Lincoln Cathedral, some 15 miles away across the central Lincolnshire Vale, between the Wolds and the Lincolnshire Edge. Much of the village would form part of the Heanage estate, centred on Hainton Hall a mile to the north. As such, you do get the feeling here of being in an estate village. Most of the remaining land was owned by the church, although land to the east of the High Street forms part of the Stenigot estate instead. In 1957, the Heanage estate auctioned off 34 dwellings and small holdings, a figure that accounted for over half the village at that time. Before the 1870s, Woodbine Cottage at the centre of the village served as the post office. It later transferred to a village shop opposite, which was run by the same family until it closed in the 1980s. There has never been a public house in the village, though. A school was built on Blacksmith Lane in 1834 for 30 children. It was never full to capacity though. It closed in 1918 and any remaining children transferred to the school in Hainton. The building has since converted to a residence. Industrially, SouthWillingham relied a lot on farming and the processes that went along with it. Being on a hill, it was the ideal place for a windmill. A tower mill built to grind corn was built in the 1850s and it was fitted with 6 sails by Saundersons of Louth. It later converted to 4 sails in the 1890s. These were removed in 1935 and the tower was demolished in 1958. When working, the mill also served a sizable area to the western side of the village, as neighbouring mills on the central Lincolnshire Vale were some distance away. A medieval windmill stood on the southern parish boundary, to the west of the Benilworth Road. There are old quarries in the parish, although none of them are currently active. Clay was excavated at a brickworks close to the old railway station in the middle of the 19th century, however that had gone on the 1906 OS map. Sand and gravel pits were shown on the 1887 OS map at the end of Moores Lane. These, though, were very small. Here's a fun fact for you. In this modern day and age, we're all used to the idea of our houses being connected to the mains water system. Not here. SouthWillingham doesn't have main sewerage. Instead, each property is connected to its own septic tank. Surface water drainage has been installed under some roads in the village and channels surface water from roadside gullies and some field drains into nearby water courses. SouthWillingham had both Wesleyan and Free Methodist chapels, built in 1834 and 1855 respectively. The Wesleyan chapel on Barkwith Road, close to the centre of the village, closed in 1972. The Free Methodist chapel, sited further along Barkwith Road, closed in 1933. Both are now converted to dwellings. The Wesleyan chapel could originally seat 150 people. It was later enlarged in 1877, but the number of seats went down to 140, oddly. A schoolroom was added in 1903. Okay, we've reached the end of Barkwith Road, which is basically SouthWillingham's main junction. And if you go to the left here, you're heading towards the village hall. We'll talk about that in a moment. If you go to the right, that takes you towards SouthWillingham's old railway station. We're going to the left first, then to the right. And the church, by the way, is also on this corner somewhere, so we'll catch all three of those. SouthWillingham Parish Hall was gifted to the village in 1922 by Lord Heanage, according to the plaque at its entrance. It was built as a memorial to those who died in the First World War. The hall is used for social and public events and meetings such as coffee mornings and groups for art, dance and history. During the summer, it's used as a refreshment stop for cyclists. SouthWillingham Parish Council meet at the hall too, and it's also used at election time as the local polling station. St Martin's Church is part of the Barkwith Group, which incorporates the further 6 surrounding churches and former ecclesiastical parishes of East Barkwith, West Barkwith, East Torrington, West Torrington, Six Hills and Hainton. A service at SouthWillingham is usually held on the first Sunday of every month, and there's a carol service every Christmas. A Grade 2 listed building, the church is built of greenstone. It was rebuilt between 1835 and 38, but the perpendicular style tower and screen remain today. When the church was restored, traces of early English foundations were discovered in the nave. The lower parts of the chancel walls are Norman and the walls are thinner, with a 13th century facing. The tower houses a clock and 3 bells, the largest of which is dated 1612. The other 2 bells are smaller, one dated 1670 and the other undated. There is a tradition that about a century ago, one of the Viner family, who we met back in Gortby, was lost on the wolds in fog and found his way to SouthWillingham by the sound of the bells, which were ringing in preparation for Christmas. The clock mechanism was made by J.W. Benson of Ludgate Hill in London. It was repaired and refurbished in 2016 and still chimes the hours. The churchyard surrounds the building on 3 sides and has over 140 marked graves, the earliest of which is dated 1802. Now, from the churchyard, you can see the Belmont transmitting station. It is there. I don't know whether you can actually see it from this distance, actually, because these GoPro cameras are not very good when it comes to picking up stuff from a long way away. But don't worry, we will be right next to that in a short while. We've still got the railway station to cover here in the village. That's a little bit of a trek away from the church, so I'll head back to the car and we'll drive towards that next. Okay, this took a bit of finding because it wasn't the most obvious of old railway station sites, but the thing that gives it away is the fact that close to it there's a massive embankment, which of course is where the railway would have been. SouthWIllingham railway station closed in the 1950s. It was on the Great Northern Railway branch line from Bardney to Louth, and it's 650 yards south of the village centre on the Bennyworth Road. The station included one platform, two sidings and a signal box. The branch was mostly single track and crossed the road on an arched underbridge, which has since been demolished. East of the station and just over the parish boundary, the railway passed under the High Street via a 557-yard long tunnel, known variously as the SouthWIllingham Tunnel, the Bennyworth Tunnel or the High Street Tunnel. The tunnel and its approach cuttings are now an SSSI. Piper sports cars were manufactured by Embrook Engineering from a large brick and asbestos industrial shed in the railway station yard. The kit cars used fiberglass bodies with Triumph and Ford components and were made from June 1973 onwards. The building is now used by a welding and steel fabrication company. Okay, here we are then at the Belmont transmitter. Now I've seen this loads of times when I've been driving to the coast, anywhere along the Lincolnshire coast. You can see this for miles, and I tell you, it's one of the landmarks that people look out for when they're heading eastwards. It's massive, it's huge. You know what? I might not even be able to get all this in one shot. No, I can't. As you can see, I'm having to go up and up and up, and I'm still not at the top. There we go. There's lots to talk about with this, so let's. This is the Belmont Transmitting Station, a broadcasting and telecommunications facility next to the B1225. It's owned and operated by Arqiva. Effectively, it's just a tubular steel mast with a lattice upper section held in place by a series of guy ropes. This is the second tallest structure in the UK, but it used to be taller. It was shortened in April 2010 and now measures from floor to tip 1,154 feet. Before shortening, it was 1,272 feet high and was the tallest structure in the country. It was also considered to be the tallest structure of its kind in the world. It can be seen in daylight on clear days from most areas close to and within the Lincolnshire Wolds. On clear nights, its bright red aircraft warning lights can be widely seen across much of Lincolnshire, from as far north as the Humber Estuary and Barton upon Humber. Without a doubt, Belmont is easily one of Lincolnshire's best known structures. It was built in 1964 with the foundations laid in the summer that year. The concrete foundation, measuring some 1,200 cubic feet, was built by the end of October, and the first tube sections were added in the November. The first 900 feet would be a 9-foot diameter steel cylinder, with the rest a steel lattice. It began service in 1965. When it was built, it was actually one half of an identical pair. The second one was located at Emily Moor near Huddersfield, but that collapsed due to guy rope failure caused by icing and high winds in 1969. Speaking of the ropes, they weigh 85 tons and were made by British Ropes. The steel was sourced from Rotherham, thanks to the company Steel Peach and Tozer. In all, Belmont weighs 210 tons and has 375 segments. From its location high in the Lincolnshire Wolds, it broadcasts digital television and both analogue and digital radio to Lincolnshire, Eastern Yorkshire, northern parts of Norfolk and some eastern parts of Nottinghamshire. Belmont is the main transmitter that covers the cities of Hull and Lincoln. When it was first operated, it transmitted, amongst other things, the ITV station Anglia Television. Following a reorganisation of ITV coverage in 1972, from 1974 it started transmitting neighbouring station Yorkshire Television instead, which it continues to do to this day. Belmont is one of those landmarks which a lot of people look for when they're on the way to the Lincolnshire coast. We're not going that far for our next episode though. Instead, we're staying within sight of Belmont as we head towards a village that once again is quite tiny. It's got a link to a place we covered in Boston last year. See you tomorrow and we'll learn what that is. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.